Welcome to Smart Manufacturing Mindset, where we challenge guests to think differently about manufacturing. We'll explore the nuances that hide in plain sight behind the acronyms, techno-jargon, and misinformation to get to the truths that hold real value for real people in the industry.
Welcome. My name is Mike Yost, and I'm your host for today's webcast series. I am excited to have you here joining us on the CESMII Smart Manufacturing Mindset LinkedIn Live event, where our goal in every broadcast is to challenge ourselves and to challenge our panelists to think differently about smart manufacturing. So today I'm thrilled to talk with our panelists about IT/OT convergence. And joining me in the studio today are Jonathan Wise, Vice President of Technology at CESMII, Brent Mehringer, Solutions Architect for Flexware Innovation, and Craig Egan, the Chief Engineer at ACE Technologies. Welcome, gentlemen. Now, these are the folks that you all want to hear from, and so do I, and we'll get to the conversations here in just a second. But first, I want to run through a few housekeeping items. First of all, if you do not know CESMII, you should. Please check them out online at CESMII.org. CESMII is the U.S.'s National Institute on Smart Manufacturing, a public-private partnership between the Department of Energy and UCLA. It's a member-driven organization that's driving technology research and the creation of educational content around the space of smart manufacturing. They're also building the smart manufacturing ecosystem through events such as this. Now, this series would not be possible if it was not for the partnership of SME, who is co-producing this LinkedIn Live series along with CESMII. So our goal with this webinar series is that we can zero in on different ways of thinking about smart manufacturing, about leadership, about technology, about what it means to be a modern day manufacturer, and the art of the possible. As you can tell, we are live streaming on LinkedIn at the moment, and we welcome your comments and your questions. We will take questions if and as they fit within the flow of the conversation. So please feel free to add your comments and contribute. The event is also being recorded, so you can watch it as many times as you like after the event itself. And then lastly, I would invite you to get to know CESMII online on LinkedIn, also at their website, CESMII.org. And there you can find a ton of information about their mission, their projects, the research, education, membership, and the overall ecosystem. So with that, we will get on with the show, and we are going to discuss the convergence of IT and OT. So the information technologies that are historically used to drive the business, and the OT or operational technologies which are used to run and manage production processes and equipment. This is not a new topic. In 2008, I was the marketing chairman for a nonprofit, and we chose not to use the theme of convergence for our annual conference because in 2008, we thought that the theme had been talked about too much and people didn't want to talk about it anymore. Obviously, that was wrong. People still do want to talk about it, and that's why we're here today. A lot has changed since that time, and our guests have lived right at the middle of this convergence, and so let's hear from them. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us here today. And I'd like to start with you, Brent, but I want each of you just to, keeping in mind a smart manufacturing mindset, just frame up from your personal perspective, given the experience you've had in your personal careers about this topic around IT and OT convergence. Brent, you've had different perspectives being both, in a systems integrator organization as well as being with a manufacturer. So how would you sort of set the frame here today for this topic?
Yeah, so when I was working with a manufacturer, I was in the IT department, and we were early on in our digital journey, and I noticed that there was just generally an us versus them mentality when it came to IT/OT. And I think, we would use words like, oh, there's somebody on the ops side, but they're a citizen developer, and terms like that would come up. I'm sure you've all heard those before. I think a lot of this was rooted just in the fact that, traditionally speaking, going back to the 90s and early 2000s, the operations side didn't have quite the deep technical understanding that IT groups had. So there was just a different sort of respect for it. But we're starting to see nowadays, in the last 10 years, certainly, that there's new platform technologies coming to market that really are starting to diminish the walls between IT and OT. And I think in a lot of cases, these new technologies are forcing the conversation of, who really owns, who owns what, and why do they own it? And I think it's great that we're having the conversations. I think in some manufacturers have already had them, some are just starting to have them. And as a system integrator, we get to kind of see both sides of that and kind of help that conversation and maybe help manufacturers get started with the right steps in it.
No, that's great input. Craig, so you've been embedded as an IT OT architect at Toyota for about 20 years. We talked before, you've talked about the existing infrastructure and integrating things back in the day, from mainframes all the way through the new technologies that are coming out today with advanced sensors and such. So from your perspective, how would you frame up this topic of convergence?
Well, first off, Mike, thanks for telling everybody how old I am, that I worked on mainframes. So
I didn't say you own one.
So I started when I was 9 years old, but I've been in this industry for now 38 years. And I kind of consider myself a little bit of a unicorn, because I'm a controls OT guy and a traditional IT software developer. So I've lived both sides of the story. My career, when I was very young, very, very young, we brought disruptive technology to General Motors. And that, in that time, it was the IBM XT desktop computer. So EDS and Industry 2.9 and mainframes were the thing. And this computer showed up, this desktop, and these young kids, controls engineers, are out doing stuff, something new. So this is Groundhog Day for me, right? It's all over again, the same thing. But there's a difference. Yeah, the technology is more advanced, but the workforce is so much more informed on technology, right? So the OT folks, we used to love it, right? If you're an IT guy, the computer room was the sacred domain. The controls guy, hey, I need a report, I need this logged. They're a lot smarter than that now. They understand these technologies. They've been writing apps since they were in 6th grade, and they've got home automation devices. They program, their cell phones to do the kind of things we do in the factories. So we are demystified in the IT OT space now. The IT folks are. The OT folks are getting a lot smarter. However, traditional IT, we still haven't quite adopted the OT mentality. So we're a little behind the games. We understand cloud, we understand software, but the IT folks don't know as much about OT as the OT folks know now about IT. So it's a very interesting dynamic.
That is a very interesting dynamic, and I think very well put, especially as you consider the speed with which technology has just, the capabilities and power have taken off over the last several years, and no signs of slowing down. So we'll definitely dig into that more with you. I wanted to just turn to Jonathan and have him frame things up. Your background, Jonathan, experience at Rockwell, experience at Amazon, Microsoft, obviously now leading the charge at CESMII. So you've been both on the OT side and the IT side, and are responsible from a CESMII perspective to help guide the nation forward and how we make sense of these things. So how about you share with everybody your perspectives of framing up this convergence topic?
Yeah, I think I got really lucky coming into this. I went to school to learn to write software for business systems and got my first job at Rockwell and sort of cut my teeth on that. And even then, it was really clear there was a disparity in these technologies. I spent about 10 years writing information software for manufacturing. The Microsoft role was something of a segue, one out of coding day to day, and two, we kind of back out to a different level of technology. I was there for the birth of this thing called Azure, Microsoft's first foray into the cloud. And then I went to Amazon, where I spent 3 years working on consumer products. And I thought I was done with manufacturing at that point. And there was a lot of lessons from Amazon that are probably a whole other discussion. one of the things that I really took away was how much information informed everything we did at Amazon. The products that we made, the features that we invested in, how we manufactured, how we reached customers, how we dealt with the supply chain. Everything was data-driven or information-driven. There was a whole department whose job it was to take this data and turn it into information that was useful for decision-making. So when I got lured back into this manufacturing world, rejoined Rockwell after about 3 years at Amazon, and it was with the stated intent to bring some of these kind of consumer technology ideas and practices to product management at Rockwell, and we shipped some interesting products. But the shocking thing for me, stepping back into this world like 13 years after my career had started, was how little had changed. How we were still doing things the way we were when I cut my teeth in the late 90s, and just really resistant to or unable to adopt some of the practices, the IT, the software development, the manufacturing and product prioritization practices from the consumer world that make it agile, that make it able to respond to change, just still didn't exist in manufacturing, and it was remained shocking to me. I think for me in my role at CESMII, it's about information. It's about making sure manufacturers can get smarter by understanding the information that's coming out of their systems.
Well, why don't we stick with that? We've heard for a long time people talk about the transition from data to information to insights to knowledge and wisdom and that whole chain. But let's talk a little bit about the technologies. And before we do, I just wanted to comment that I see Bruno from Chicagoland commenting. Several other people are participating and dropping in comments. So please feel free to drop any insights you have or questions you have into the chat here. But Jonathan, just wanted to circle back with you. It's easy for someone like me to say, hey, let's just transform data into information and all be smarter. But looking at it from a technology or a technical perspective, you want to talk a bit about, we're hearing things, people talking about data engineering, information modeling, unified namespace, some of the more technical kind of oriented discussions. Can you sort of tee that up here, and if there's any direction that CESMII is advising people to go?
Yeah, I think my frame up for that is Jonathan's theory of alternate evolution. In OT technology, the model, the information model, evolved from OT technology. The common denominator is usually key value pairs, which are PLC tags or historian tags. That's how information is modeled and understood in OT, and that came from programming a PLC. So it's rich with kind of the logical interactions of individual points of data, but as a technology foundation, it's very different from how IT technology evolved, which is an object model. And we're beyond object models now. Object-oriented programming is our common denominator that's been around for 30 years. And rather than assuming points of data, we assume classes, we assume object, we assume relationships between those objects that can be explicitly traced or reflected upon. If you grew up programming databases, you think of them as schemas, but really it's a much richer information environment than what we start with in OT. And it's not just like a difference between modeling primitives. It's the ecosystems that have grown up and evolved in parallel around these two points of view of the world. And so when we reach the level where we want to push them together, where we want to gather information from the OT layer and model it or reflect on it or leverage it using IT tools, we end up having to build an abstraction layer that maps the two worlds. And the industry is littered with them. Some of them are decent, some of them suck, but they're a required part of this process that everybody has had to work through or is kind of in the process of working through it. And UNS is yet another, unified namespace is yet another way to try and wrap your head around this impedance mismatch between how the technologies have evolved.
Excellent. So Brent, Craig, you guys want to talk about you're engaged specifically with clients that are trying to figure out this technology landscape. So Brent, maybe you want to comment on how you're seeing your clients have the conversation around the convergence topics that Jonathan just mentioned.
Yeah, a lot of it really depends on the field or your scope of view of what problem you're trying to solve. It almost always comes down to that. So to Jonathan's point, if you're working on a shop floor solution where you need a PLC to do something, you're only focused about what's its sensor value, what do I got to do when it hits this threshold, then you make a decision and you execute. You turn on a solenoid or you turn on a conveyor. Now, as you go up the stack, the questions you ask and the decisions you have to make are much more complex. You don't just consider one piece of information like a sensor value. There's maybe 5 pieces of information, and they're all tied together somehow. So it's those relationships and giving those key value pairs context with themselves, with other key value pairs, with global things going on in the factory, like what order am I running? All those things become critical, and even more critical the further you go up to like business systems and ERPs and get into that level. So that's the challenge is how do you tie it together? And understanding that before you just start throwing everything in a database is a very important part of this.
Craig, how about you from your vantage point, what you're seeing people implement or the questions they're asking and the work that Jonathan and team are doing? How do you see these things coming together?
I don't know why you're asking me. Jonathan and Brent are the 2 smartest guys I know. So, there's something we got to remember, today's teams, everybody that I work with is armed with a master's degree in computer engineering from the University of YouTube. All of our clients and customers are in the game right now, and as they should be, right? 10 years ago, it was so much easier, right? A customer would show up with a bar napkin spec and say, I need this report, I need this screen. I don't care if you make it out of hot dogs, that's what I want. Totally different now. Customers don't come to us with the spec. They come to us with, I want technology. I want this Industry 4.0 tool. I want something. I want a broker. I want something I've seen, a product, not necessarily even a deliverable. They want a product, and they want all this data. And honest to God, on my screen, anybody that's worked with me for long enough, the background on my screen, my favorite saying, has to do with data, because I absolutely hate data collection. So the grandfather of modern day TPS, Tacciano, and he said this, gosh, he's older than I am, so must have been hundreds of years ago. Data is very important in manufacturing, but I place the greatest emphasis on facts, right? And so what we're talking about is facts, right? Where Jonathan's talking about contextualization and modeling, right? Data is useless, brokering every piece of data that you've got on the planet and thinking that that's the solution is just going to get you in trouble, right? So a more, organized, structured, contextual approach to data is really important. And also to kind of keep, with Industry 4.0, we're supposed to stop being so vendor agnostic. In the days I used to, I'm a Rockwell guy or I'm a active plant guy, right? We're supposed to be a little more agnostic, but it's almost gone the other way. We're seeing a lot of, I call it technology cancel culture, right? I just don't like OPC, so all OPC software must be terrible, or I can't stand a product by this vendor because this other product I've seen on a YouTube video is amazing and it uses all of the key phrases that I think are important in Industry 4.0. So we get kind of lost in all of this. Really, it's a very, very hard time. But if we just get back to the point is, right, having that contextualized, well-modeled data versus, collecting data is our secret. And hopefully that's what we're going to get into. Approaches that do that, but also respect that our clients are very interested in the tech, along with just the solution.
So do the clients recognize, Craig, if they're focused on the tech or if they're focused on applications, that there's the potential risk of having to stitch all these things together? I know part of the focus from a CESMII perspective is to drive interoperability of applications, worry. You've already talked about trying to be vendor agnostic, but ending up almost going the opposite way, where you're getting trapped more and more locked in.
Can I react to this a little bit before Craig goes back in? So in the consumer world, the vendors benefit from this kind of technology religion, right? Like, I'm an Apple guy or I'm an Android guy. But the problem is the vendors generally provide complete ecosystems. They're relatively simplistic. There's lots you can do with apps, but the universe to conquer is relatively small. So you can say that this ecosystem gets my religious fervor because it does everything that I need. And you can't do that in manufacturing because there is no one vendor that solved all of the problems. We need to be irreligious about it. We need to, at the moment at least, find the best solutions and make sure that those are interoperable, because there is none that's going to solve all of your problems. We need to be able to build an ecosystem out of parts that work together.
Yep, I agree. And some people are overestimating wow, if we just have a UNS or this, everything just suddenly goes away. But unified namespace of trash is this trash unification, right? Yeah. It doesn't solve the underpinnings, right? The part that all these industry 2.9, 3.1, all the way up through industry 6.0, I'm sure. The nitty-gritty legwork of making sure that you've got good, solid, contextualized data has been there since the beginning of time, and it will always be. And no technology is going to solve that. As a matter of fact, it might even make it worse, right? Having 10 or 100 times more trash data than we had before is worse than having just a nice, clean set of data that's truly understood and modeled correctly.
And so from an advice perspective, Jonathan, obviously the CESMII organization is advocating an approach of modeling the information. You want to talk about sort of the approach moving forward, the way that you can help people figure this out, because you're talking about not just the manufacturers themselves, but this entire ecosystem has to understand this, right? Whether it's application provider, machine builders, systems integrators, the manufacturers themselves. So how do you guys advocate the path moving forward?
Yeah, it's exactly what Craig said, and what I know Brent and Flexware practice is that as I'm solving a problem, step zero is, what is the information model of the problem? What is the data contract necessary to fulfill the analytic that helps me make the decision? So that's step zero, is build the information model first. The information model then becomes the contract. The OT systems have to fulfill that contract. So whatever integration is necessary to fulfill that contract. And if I'm in a heterogeneous environment, I might have to do that mapping a couple times, because I'm made up of systems from other people, but that's fine because I have a target to hit. And then if I'm an IT system, the information model is what I'm building the application against. I can have confidence that the underlying platform will fulfill it. The work will be done to make that work. And then I can just focus on the problem of building the application or the analytic. There was a second part to the question that I lost track of there. How is CESMII doing this? So those information models we call profiles, and the goal of a profile is never to be comprehensive and complete. Profiles themselves are built out of component profiles, and profiles are components of a larger information model. And so maybe when you've solved the first problem, all you need is the profile. But as soon as you have two profiles, two sets of information, you need to be able to track the relationships between those. And that's where a modern platform, that abstraction layer to IT, needs to exist. That's the layer that tracks that context, that keeps track of it. and you can't depend on a PLC, and you can't depend on a UNS or a broker or even a historian to do it for you. You need a modern, IT-friendly, rich API platform layer that persists the relationship between these information models and presents the larger kind of organically growing information model.
And this is the type of work, obviously, that CESMII was founded to further, to investigate, to research, to prove. Right? So there are projects, there's funding coming from the federal government to put these types of solutions in place and prove them out. And again, I encourage you to get to know CESMII and check out the website for more information on how the team is going about doing such things. And Brent, I want to just circle back to you as far as from an organizational perspective. Like, how are you seeing the clients that you're working with attack this problem? And organizationally, structurally, you mentioned at the top that sort of the two sides of IT and OT and how they don't necessarily work together. What are you seeing in practice that you would call out as a best practice here for people to understand?
Well, it may be too early to say what is best practice, but from what I've seen and what I personally lived through was I was in an IT department, and we slowly started to form this smart manufacturing team from the IT department. I'm also seeing from some of the clients we work with the same thing happening from the engineering department. So it's becoming obvious to me, at least, that companies are now starting to recognize the problem, or not, maybe it's a problem, but then they're starting to address it by at least organizing people. They're getting intentional about it. These groups, at least the one that I was part of initially, are kind of on the side in a support role. But I think it's quickly becoming, obvious that these groups need to be leading the discussion. We need to tackle the problem. We don't want to use tools. You don't grab a hammer and go looking for nails. It goes the other way around, right? And the teams that are forming these smart manufacturing teams or manufacturing technology teams or some variation of those names, they understand the problem. They're on the shop floor. They see what's going on. They know the challenges. They can take those back to both groups, IT, operations, engineering teams, and accurately explain the problem, the nature of the problem, and have each of the other groups, IT and ops, help them solve the problem.
So are you guys seeing, and maybe this is for the whole group, are you seeing organizations that they're recognizing the fact that that this is not a problem or a solution set that's owned by one part of the organization, right? That the manufacturing teams, the ops teams, the IT teams need to be working together. So are you seeing people in practice where they're elevating that the importance of these topics of having digital capabilities
It's
to a
more
more strategic level?
What I'm seeing, and it's both good and it's a challenge. If you had asked me 10 years ago to have a technical discussion about some of this stuff, I couldn't drag 3 of my friends together at the customers. Really, no one really wanted to get into the nitty-gritty. But now, again, with everybody with really the younger workforce is much more IT-centric. You get a group of stakeholders that come in. You have a huge cross-functional group. Business owners, technical people that are very, very aware of this technology. So you have a lot of voices. And so obviously one of the things is that's going to drive up your time and cost, right? When you have 100 ideas, because these are all really good ideas, but they want to be involved. And the challenge is, so someone like me, because thanks to you, Mike, you had to tell everybody that I've been doing this for 38 years. So, us old folk, we can't get caught up in forgetting that at one point in my career, I was the disruptor with the IBM PC, and the naysayers in the data center mainframe were like, that is just crazy stuff. That'll never work. This is old proven technology. So as an organization, they have to somehow make sure that we cannot throw away the knowledge that we've learned in Industry 3.1 through 3.9, and just think that rip and replace with Industry 4.0, thinking Industry 4.0 is actually a product when it's not, it's a mindset. But to bring the experience levels and the open-minded opinions on both sides. For someone that's done this for 6 months versus someone that's done this for 40 years, we're going to be coming at it from a very different perspective. So we have discussions that are way more cross-functional on a business level than technology. The technology is almost the easy part. It's this part that's the challenge.
So just a couple of really quick points here. One, I'm glad to know that you have at least 3 friends, Craig. That's
yeah, they're right here. They're on the list.
That's more than I.
And Mike, by the way, I don't know if it's just me, but when you talk, because I come from the old days of Hollywood Squares, if I'm on the corner, I look down at your box. I'm like trying to, align myself as you're talking.
All right, we'll take comments. Whoever is old enough to remember Hollywood Squares without Googling it. But I did want to pull up something. One of the comments that was made, and let everybody know that we're targeting half an hour for this conversation. We're at that point. So if you have comments, questions, please go ahead and get them in now, and we'll try to get them in. There was one that I wanted to pull up. AJ talked about looking forward to hearing how this convergence is impacting cybersecurity strategy. So I'm not sure who wants to start with that, but if you guys talk about this conversation, strategy to technology to cyber, how is this playing into the cybersecurity conversation?
I mean, the old way to handle cybersecurity when you get to the OT is just to air gap. There is no cyber. It's all a private network and nothing flows in between. And then we gradually added like a DMZ, usually at the historian. So we acknowledge that some data needs to move in between. And so we kind of like carve these really specific pipes in there. More and more manufacturers are putting in separate networks, like sensor to cloud networks or cellular networks. And they're just kind of like going around the infrastructure because the infrastructure is not evolving fast enough, or everyone's kind of too scared to carve more tunnels in between because they're not sure they can do it right. And this is part of the same impedance mismatch. Is there's lots of established practice for how to secure things on the internet, and it's never touched the OT layer in any significant way. And we need to bring these cybersecurity practices together in the same way we're bringing information technology best practices together. And I want to throw in one more comment on the organizational thing that's related to this. Just putting people in the room is a great start. So I've had the privilege over the past year of being in the room with some of these convergence teams, IT and OT and ops, from small manufacturers to large, and it's awesome that the conversations are happening. In every case, because I've kind of spent my life straddling both worlds, I've observed people using words to mean one thing, and those words being received meaning another thing. So when the OT people speak and they use a word, the IT people are hearing their understanding of the word, and then they're using the word back with their understanding of it, and nobody is noticing that the word's meaning is changing in the air. And it's the same thing with cybersecurity as well. All of this needs to converge, and sure, it starts by putting people in the room, but you also need a translator in the room to help the teams learn to understand each other.
You need Jerry Springer. I mean, that's how some of these things get. Face it, right? I mean, they do. I mean, they're very challenging, and you're right. I mean, cyber is interesting because, let's face it, cybersecurity was the reason why some of these new Industry 4.0 products even exist, right? We had to get rid of some of our older stuff because we just couldn't, these things weren't built to be patched every month. They just weren't. They were built to be patched every 5 years. So, and they've got so many security holes and decom patch and this patch and this patch. So, these new products found their way in partly because the other ones they can't cut the chase. They're not built for that level of grief. So
SCADA systems running on Windows Server 2003 if you're lucky.
right. I mean, so it's a whole, but you're right. It's Jerry Springer moments. That's all they are.
Well, I was going to say that it's part of the ecosystem building responsibilities of CESMII, right? To get these people together and to move these conversations forward as well. So I did want to also let everybody know that we're seeing some good comments come in, and if we don't get to your comments, which we will not get to all of them, we will reach out and try to get you an answer. There was one other question that I wanted to bring up from Insanto. That says, what can early stage manufacturers implement for growth with an MVP in place? So if, I think whether it's early stage or it's small manufacturers, obviously there's a lot of work that CESMII is doing to, in their terminology, democratize smart manufacturing and make it accessible to manufacturers at all stages of their journey. So anybody want to comment on their recommendations on how to get started?
My immediate thought there is to think with the information that you want to move first, right? And know that you're going to do it eventually. So if you're just getting started with your digital journey, or you're just getting started with a new plant and you want to put systems in, try to find one that allows your data to be more available across the board. You don't know what you're going to do with it yet, but eventually you're going to need to do something with it. And tools like the CESMII tool, supporting protocols like MQTT, things of that nature, are going to be good steps, early steps in the right direction.
I mean, I think even don't overthink it, right? I mean, just the bigger an organization gets and the longer you've had any kind of a platform, you realize that the littlest things in the world, like, my goodness, if I had standardized on the color of an icon, blue is stopped and green is running, very, very simple things that if you had laid some groundwork down from day zero, it will save you an immense amount of time. Too many people are too anxious to grab everything they can and just go, that Industry 4.0 is all about quantity and not quality. I would say slow it down. Spend the time to really organize and say, as a company, we're going to do this, this, and this. These are our standards. This is how we're going to count parts. This is how we're going to do anything. And having that structure is, to me, if I have 4 good points and I have a standard that I've applied, I've done my work.
And I'll add, apply significant doubt to the technology silver bullet mindset. Like, this vendor is going to come in and save the day with product X. There is a lot of work that we need to do. And if you pick a technology horse, you will eventually hit its limitations, but you'll have invested a lot before you realize that. You can't skip the homework. You can't skip the hard part, which is that this information in the OT layer needs to be made sense of before I'm going to give it to some technology vendor who promises magic atop it. You can't skip the information modeling problem. You can piecemeal it, though. You can start with, this is the problem I want to solve today. What is the information model for it? And where am I going to persist that model? And then finally, what technology vendor am I going to broker that data to test them out to see if they can help me with that specific problem? And that brokering layer, not to reuse the word broker, but the information model layer, that becomes the place that you evolve your information model, you evolve your practice, and that abstraction allows you to test different technologies and see what really works for you.
Well, excellent. Appreciate it, guys. Appreciate all the conversation. And we still have more comments coming in, so apologize. We're going to have to start to wrap this up here. I think it's evident from at least my takeaway with this is that there are technological discussions to be had. There are certainly organizational and behavioral things that need to happen as well, but that's part of being part of the ecosystem. I think that it would certainly make sense for people to plug your technical people in with folks like Craig and Jonathan and Brent, who you can find at CESMII, and go deeper with these types of conversations. We still have more questions coming in about data transfer and different types of solutions and things like that. So I would certainly encourage you to plug into the CESMII ecosystem and get to go as deep as you need to go on these areas if you're responsible for those different areas of operation. So with that, I really want to just give everybody the opportunity to share some closing thoughts. If you can give one takeaway for the audience today on how to think differently about the IT/OT convergence, what would that be? And like Jonathan, for you to start, then we'll go to Brent, and we'll let Craig close us out. So Jonathan, your takeaway?
I think the takeaway for me is start with information modeling. CESMII can help. The cloud library has over 100 component information models created by expert groups and increasingly by CESMII project teams. They're a great starting place. Hopefully it helps folks think about just the information modeling problem by itself. What is the information contract that I need to fulfill and exploit in order to solve a problem? A great way to engage would be to become a CESMII member, but everything we do is open source or open spec. So if you just want to kick the tires and learn, check out our webpage or our GitHub, or reach out to my team on Discord. We'd love to chat with you about where you're at on your journey.
Excellent. Thank you. Brent, how about you? How about a takeaway for the audience?
My takeaway sort of echoes something Jonathan mentioned a few minutes ago. And, it's with this convergence, it's kind of unique in that we got different people using the same tools, sometimes for the same goals, but they're being measured differently. In IT wants to avoid downtime, but ops wants to keep moving and changing. We got to do new things. And to the point Jonathan made a few minutes ago is just start the conversation. I mean, that's the hardest part. Get in the same room, start helping each other understand the challenges from your point of view. And that's kind of where it all starts. Now we're going to solve it.
Excellent. And Craig, how about your takeaway?
So I have two takeaways. Number one is just specifically about CESMII. Their logo always aligns with their ears. And so the whole time I'm looking at Jonathan and he's got that earring. Look, see, yeah. So they need a different logo. But I guess my takeaway is stop thinking that technology is going to solve 20 years of bad practice. That all it's probably going to do is make things worse if done wrong. Remember, facts are different than data. They're two different things, and implement solutions that lead to clean, contextualized data. Quality being more important than quantities, and figure out ways that you can preserve the good things in some of the existing, whether it's a spec or a system that you've got, and modernize in manageable chunks and deliver the solution, not the technology. Don't just rip it out because I'm going to put in a technology, put in a solution. Sounds easy. I mean, just do it.
Modernize in manageable chunks. That's a great soundbite.
This is easy. Yeah.
Yep. Great soundbite. I like that. Well, sorry, but we do need to put a bow on this. Great set of conversations. We're obviously just scratching the top of the surface here. I'd like to thank Brent, thank Craig, thank Jonathan for joining us. Also, all of you who participated, AJ, John, Rebecca, Nasanta, so many others that have put comments in. And again, we will try to respond to those the best that we can. We'd also like to thank again SME as a partner for the role that they play alongside CESMII in building out the smart manufacturing ecosystem and helping to instill the right mindset. I encourage everyone to get to know CESMII, follow them on LinkedIn, check them out online at cesmi.org. Join us again next month. At the end of the month, we will have our next edition of the LinkedIn Live webcast series on the smart manufacturing mindset. It will be late in June, and it will be focused on the topic of sustainable manufacturing. If you're following the CESMII LinkedIn page, then you will get updates when we have the date finalized and the guests with us. Lastly, if you're interested in learning more, you can join all of us at the Smart Manufacturing Experience, which is an event being held at South Tech in October, the 24th to the 26th in Greenville, South Carolina. There is a link available, which you can access through the CESMII website. And the team will be hosting technical deep dive sessions, talking about these types of applications, leveraging the CESMII innovation platform, also rolling out the tool set for assessing your current state and understanding and building out roadmaps to get all those people that the team has talked about getting to the same table, giving them some guidance and support in actually moving forward together. So with that, we will say thank you and hope to see you next month. And we encourage you that when you think about smart manufacturing, think differently. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.